From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on May 26, 2026 in South Carolina Public Radio studios here in Columbia. I know we're running and gunning, guys. A lot of breaking news. We're trying to cram it in between newscasts and NPR hits and everything else. So we're bringing you this episode of The Lede, looking at how the Senate killed the redistricting effort after the chamber failed to block a Democratic-backed filibuster and 14 Republicans joined the 12 Democrats to join the bill on the White House's redistricting push to change South Carolina's congressional map in an effort to pick up one more seat, just one more seat, the 6th district represented by Congressman Jim Clyburn. We take you from where we last left off to how it all ended Tuesday afternoon. 3 weeks, all for theater. Also, there's so much, there's no wind down. That doesn't mean you can't call and let me know what you thought about this entire process as we went through it together. Just spending time and extra money and all for show and fun. 803-563-7169. This is politics. This is the great stuff here. This is what we love for. We're still in the middle of a primary. 803-563-7169. Debates are coming up, folks. Ballots are being cast. Okay, it's Tuesday, and the Senate has just voted against invoking cloture. That's a motion that requires 3/5 of the Senate, or 26 senators, to vote to limit debate on the map. I know people say, don't use the word cloture. Well, you are educated listeners. I'm going to tell you what's going on here, instead of just procedural motions and all that stuff. Cloture limits the debate. In fact, 12 Republicans then joined the Democrats on that vote, which failed 20-24. Then the death knell came with the motion to continue the bill. Words you never want to hear about your bill because it kills it. It sounds like, oh, that's a good thing. It's going to continue it. No, it does not. It does the opposite. It kills the bill.
Interesting.
It's like when inflammable means flammable. Even more Republicans joined in that motion, 26-18, killing the redistricting effort after 3 weeks.
Wow.
But let's pick up where I left off.
Where?
The House passed the same map the morning of May 20th, and it immediately had a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing that afternoon.
Over 7 hours.
More than 50 people spoke on the bill. The majority were against it. The committee briefly debated it, and it did not entertain any amendments on it, as Chairman Luke Rankin was looking to get that map out the door to the floor as quickly as possible because procedural hurdles awaited. More on that in a moment. But again, no amendments. This map remained unchanged from the Republican Redistricting Trust through the House to the Senate floor. No touching, no amendments. That's unprecedented for a process that lawmakers control. They gave it all away. Said, here's the map, thanks, okay. Now, State Election Commission Director Conway Belanger answered a question from Charleston Democratic Senator Dion Tedder about the turnaround time between the end of the June 9th primaries and the 23rd runoffs and getting ballots ready for a rescheduled congressional primary on August 18th if that bill was to pass.
We can't start doing any of that work until after we finish the runoff, if necessary, for June. So that's where.
So how practicable is it? I mean, for you all to, just from a standpoint of logistics, how practical is that for you all to be able to get through the runoff and then create new ballots to then mail overseas in hopes that they would even receive them in time to get them back?
It is a monumental task. Lots of man hours. Lots of work, not only from the State Election Commission, but all the counties would be involved. So it is a major task, one that is extremely tight time-wise, extremely tight. Any blip causes us a problem. That filing date of June 5th is with that filing closing, then that's sort of a drop dead date for us, because past that, everything gets to be totally discombobulated, and to the point that we may have difficulty in assuring a good, secure election.
Right, because
for
my
Congress.
understanding, you don't just create the ballots, you have to go through a series of testing them, correct?
Absolutely.
How long is that? Walk me through that process. What is that?
In this situation, we'll be testing at nights and weekends, and dealing with the counties. Of course, it's a shorter ballot. It means that the test deck will be, the testing of this will be quicker, but it's still a process where we will have to test every ballot that will be used in the August primary and runoff.
One other issue was the 40 or so precincts, mainly in urban areas, that would have been split under this proposed map. Typically, maps are drawn to keep counties as whole as possible, especially precincts. So imagine you, a voter like me, walk up to your precinct where you vote, and it's not home to just one congressional district, but two. That's complicated. Different ballots. Things get tricky there. Here's Belanger talking with Charleston Republican Senator Chip Campson, one of the handful of Republicans against this last-minute push.
Most of it will be done electronically, where we take an entire county maybe and move them from one congressional district to another, or we take precincts in total.
But the split precincts are what cause you the problem.
Right, and those are going to have to be done almost manually, and we hope that can be done short order. But again, that's a manual thing and prone to what mistakes, manual, personal mistake. We hope not. We will have double, triple checks everywhere along the line. Charleston County is one of the problem areas, and I sure hope that Charleston can jump on this and help us get that done. But every county will have some sort of change. But our biggest problems are in major metropolitan areas.
Now, filing for the new proposed congressional primary was going to be between June 1st to June 5th. Candidates running in these races were going to be drastically affected. In fact, the 7th congressional district was set to become the new 1st congressional district in a sense, stretching from Myrtle Beach down the Grand Strand through Georgetown into Charleston with all of Mount Pleasant, talking the peninsula to Folly Beach.
I'm sorry, what?
And it drew some concerns. In fact, communities of interest is a phrase used when redrawing congressional maps, and that was really not a factor in this map from Washington. In fact, you had Clemson's Death Valley and USC's Williams-Brice Stadium in the same proposed 3rd congressional district. Now, Mount Pleasant Mayor Will Haney expounded upon his concerns for the growing coast.
We are the only municipality that is completely lock, stock, and barrel, the entire community being moved out of the district in which we are a community of interest with all the others. We are completely being moved and being put in a district with Myrtle Beach. And this is nothing about or against Myrtle Beach. No, trust me. I like that. Exactly. Trust me. Nothing against Myrtle Beach, but nothing against Charleston, where our people live and work and have to do those things. And I mean, look at that map. Name another municipality of close to 100,000 people that is just being kicked basically out of its congressional district. We have 3 candidates for Congress who reside in the town of Mount Pleasant who are being zoned out of their district. So you talk about having your influence, your circle of influence, your community of interest lessened. We've got 3 great candidates that represent the two major parties, and now they're going to be out of their congressional district. So we're feeling this, and I just hope, Senator, like I said in the statement with Mayor Cogswell, we don't diminish anybody else's needs, but we know that ours are tied to that economy, to that infrastructure, and to that regional, everything about that region.
Haney also mentioned how Republican Representative Mark Smith, who was running for the 1st congressional district nomination, has a sign at the foot of the Ravenel Bridge that would no longer be in the 1st district under the map. But listen to this growth Haney talks about, which is another concern folks had when you're talking about redistricting off of the 2020 census data that, again, was affected by COVID. Remember 2020?
2020.
Rough stuff.
Under the census data that I saw from 24 to 25, Horry County has 37 people per day moving into Horry County. So we've swapped. We have slowed it down. We've done that on purpose, and Horry County is speeding up. And you got to ask, if we're doing this without waiting on the 2030 census, how long are these lines that we're spending all this time talking about, how long are those lines going to still be valid based on that kind of population growth? And statewide, it's 182.5 people a day moving into the state of South Carolina.
So imagine you're a candidate who's been campaigning for months, sending targeted advertising, visiting communities, holding events, shaking hands, making calls, walking in parades, going to forums, all that stuff, kissing babies that can't vote in a district of your voters, only for the legislature, forced by Washington, to completely change it and add a bunch of new voters that you haven't even engaged with. Oh, and by the way, you have 2 months to meet them and try and win them over when there are a dozen or so candidates seeking the party's nomination. Oh, and not to mention the voter turnout would be incredibly low in August and precincts will be consolidated because some of them are in schools that will be in session. Also, you no longer are living in that district. Don't worry about it, guys. It's from Washington. Now, you better believe something along those lines would be part of a lawsuit, especially if maybe I lost my race because of this push. Hey, that could still be part of a lawsuit if you lose by a close number because of voter confusion. Whew, this is not over yet, folks. But you could already hear the court filing one independent candidate could make when Kenneth Harris told the committee about how a new map would jeopardize his candidacy for the 5th Congressional District.
And I'm running as an independent because I joined the Marine Corps, and as a Marine, we don't look at Democrats or Republicans, we look at Marines. So I decided to run as an independent. I've been on the ground since October of last year, and this redistricting is going to hurt everything I've done. I had to go out and, as an independent, I have to get 10,000 signatures to be on the ballot. I'm sitting at about 75, right at 7,600 signatures that I've done myself, by myself. So now, with the redistricting, it's going to take away at least 4,000 of my signatures. The ones that's going to come straight down through Fort Mill, Lancaster, Pageland. All of these towns I actually got on the ground. Imagine in the rural area where there's dogs everywhere running loose. I don't know how many times I've been chased up on top of my car.
So the Judiciary Committee passed it to the Senate without taking up any amendments, and the next day, Democrats from the committee and their leader, Brad Hutto of Orangeburg, held a press conference in the State House lobby minutes before the start of session with 4 banker boxes full of amendments flanking the podium. Richland Senator Tamika Isaac Devine spoke on the lack of transparency surrounding the proposed map.
We had not had an opportunity to ask questions of the person who actually drew these maps. And yesterday, during Senate Judiciary, it was acknowledged that no one in South Carolina drew these maps. No one knows if the person who drew the maps had data, had guidelines, had input from South Carolinians. The normal process takes sometimes 2.5 years for maps to be drawn, for data to be gathered, for the public to be able to weigh in on the maps, and then a vote. That is the deliberative process that we're elected to be here to do. But right now, you have elected officials that have basically foregone that deliberative process and serving the folks who send us here to serve someone else who wants to stay in office. That should not be acceptable to anybody. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, white, black, we're all South Carolinians. And this affects all of us as South Carolinians. So we need to be able to send a strong message to the senators that this is not acceptable. We want people to listen to the voters.
Like the House, the chamber is governed by rules. Oh, boo! They're wonky and arcane, and he who knows the rules has a lot of power to speed up or slow things down. And when it comes to reapportionment, which is another word for redistricting, the bill is a masthead item, which means no other issue can come before it on the calendar. There also must be 2 days of debate before a 3/5 cloture vote to limit debate can take place. That is, unless you suspend the rules. When you make the rules, you can also suspend the rules, which is what Berkeley Republican Senator Larry Grooms motioned to do so on Thursday for the Friday debate, because another rule is you have to have 24 hours notice. And also, this motion would require a hard 2/3 vote of 31 senators. Now, you would think in a chamber where there are 34 senators that are Republicans, supermajority, you could do it. But on Friday, that vote failed twice. Debate really didn't take place because there's no point. You just really needed to gavel in and out, and Democrats were saving heavy debate for the expected cloture vote on Saturday. Now, cloture limits discussion on the some 100 amendments that they had filed, and really, folks can only speak up to an hour each. So for 46 senators, that would have been 46 hours, but of course we know only the 12 Democrats would really speak up to an hour with a handful of Republicans.
Still a long time.
Then we come in on Saturday. Yes, Memorial Day weekend Saturday. Yes, everyone was very excited about that. No one's been in session in the Senate on a Saturday since the 90s. Oh, the 90s are back, not in a good way. They gavelled in at 10 a.m., and a motion was adopted to meet Sunday at 2 p.m., a motion that Senator Darrell Jackson blasted, especially the Christians in the chamber for. Now, shortly after that motion, the cloture vote came, and it narrowly passed 26-18. And I will say there was some wiggle room on this vote, but it's very tricky on what a future one will look like. Now, after that vote, the Senate receded for an hour for lunch and a strategy session. And sure enough, after lawmakers returned from lunch, the dynamic shifted from the expected long, drawn-out debate and hours of speaking on the bill because of cloture and missing the entire Memorial Day weekend, etc., etc. Instead, lawmakers had a bit of a compromise, and they gave the bill a second reading vote and carried over all amendments to Tuesday, and they go into perfunctory session on Sunday and Monday, which would count as legislative days. And that set up for a big showdown on Tuesday for another cloture vote. And if that was to fail, the map and this process would die, as Democrats would filibuster it. But if cloture passed, then the debate would be limited, and like we said, folks would talk on the bill for hours, but it could still get to the governor for his signature. But, curveball. Early in-person voting began Tuesday morning, and while 12,700 absentee ballots had already been sent and some 3,400 received, for some reason the appearance of disenfranchising early voters standing in line would be a bridge too far. In fact, Senator Larry Grooms told us that in a gaggle last week that the timeline may have expired.
I've tried to make the argument to my colleagues that we may have perhaps stepped into an area where we are now out of time. The goal was always to have this bill in place before early voting begins on Tuesday. That's an impossibility under the Senate rules, unless tomorrow, one more chance for the body to suspend our cloture rule. And that would allow us to expeditiously move through the bill and the amendments, and would be able to use the same procedure for a third reading. But absent of 31 members of the Senate voting to suspend the rule, this debate can continue to drag on well past Tuesday, well into early voting, and I think that's wrong. There are other members like me who are very supportive of the legislation, but not supportive of passing this legislation after tens of thousands of South Carolinians have already cast votes in person on a voting machine. That's a totally different matter than where we are right now. So tomorrow is really a make or break day for the bill. I believe that the time has expired. The governor called us into special session to pass this legislation. There was a possible timeline. It was a very short one, and that timeline may have expired.
However, Grooms did not vote against cloture, and he also voted in support of the bill too, so his words didn't carry as much weight as I thought. So on the second reading vote, the Senate voted 27-17, with 6 Republicans joining the Democrats. They were Senators Sean Bennett, Chip Campson, Tom Davis, Greg Hembry, Shane Massey, and Luke Rankin, a newcomer to the group of opposition. They are also all committee chairmen. Senate Minority Leader Brad Hutto spoke to the press afterward about the move.
Polls will open early Tuesday morning. Voters will be voting Tuesday morning. And when we get here, we'll be under the normal rules that we would have been here under anyway. I'm sure that a cloture motion will be made again. Don't know whether the votes will be the same or not, given that people will have already by that time voted. If cloture is invoked whatever time on Tuesday, we would go to the rules of cloture, which means each senator gets up to an hour. Because we waived the 3/5 rule for amendments, it allows us to take up amendments on third reading. So there are some more amendments on the desk that we want to have heard. Whether we heard them today or we hear them on Tuesday has not been prejudiced. We'll be able to hear those amendments. We feel that there's a reasonable chance that there's not going to be the cloture votes. But if there are, and then if there were going to be anyway, we're going to be right back where we would have been, which we'll be debating this bill until probably after midnight on Tuesday. If amendments are adopted, they'll have to go back to the House on Wednesday. If amendments are not adopted, it'll go to the governor's desk on Wednesday. And then what we know will happen next, which is lawsuits are going to be filed challenging this bill. And, we'll see what the courts say about whether they're going to enjoin the election in June, or because people have already voted. We're going to have 3 sets of voters that will have voted by that time. The military votes have already been mailed out, and some of them have been received. The absentee votes for people not in the military have already been mailed out, and some of them have been received. By Tuesday morning, people are eligible to vote early on Tuesday, and we would encourage as many people as can to go out early Tuesday morning and vote. We would like the courts to know that people cherish their right to vote. They were given the right to vote early, and if they go out and vote early, their vote should count. And I firmly believe, as do many of my colleagues, and several Republicans as well. The senator from Charleston, Senator Campson, spoke pretty eloquently about this today, that he doesn't believe, given the roadmap that the court established under the Alexander case, that they're going to issue an order throwing out the votes of South Carolina voters who have already voted. And that would be adhering to federal precedent that's already been established in other cases in other states. So, we are proud of our folks who stood strong and made sure that we have carried this debate into Tuesday. That was probably the best that we were going to achieve anyway, but it actually, by getting it into Tuesday, forces another cloture vote where people are going to have to make a tough decision, because people that vote for cloture on Tuesday are actually voting to disenfranchise voters who are actually standing in line at the polls at the very time that vote will be taken.
That brings us to the vote on Tuesday. Lawmakers gavelled in and shortly thereafter met for more than an hour as more and more votes were cast, coming to about 32,000 by the time the cloture vote came in. That's record-breaking right there, folks. And that cloture vote failed. Anderson Republican Senator Richard Cash prefaced his no vote before the chamber voted 20-24.
The deadline has passed. Voting has begun. It is time to conclude the matter. Now, I know there is going to be a lot of anger and frustration that we did not get the job done. I get it. Many of us are also frustrated and disappointed at what is a very unsatisfying outcome. But we need to face it. The time clock for getting this done ran out when the time clock for in-person voting started at 8:30 this morning. As of noon today, over 26,000 votes have already been cast, which is over twice as many votes as were cast in the entire first day of early voting in 2024. I realize there are many who, in good faith, believe that we should forge ahead and pass this bill anyway and let the courts determine whether it is legitimate to change an election date and redraw maps even after voting has begun. Obviously, I disagree. But one thing I think we can agree on is that we are at a pivotal point in this process.
In addition to other Republicans, we saw Cash, Senators Ronnie Cromer, Michael Johnson, Everett Stubbs, Jeff Zell, and Finance Committee Chairman Harvey Peeler joined Democrats. Huge moves right there on that vote not to invoke cloture, because it's the deliberative body and you are talking about a massive, important masthead bill and you're saying, nope, no deliberation. Taking what Washington gave us, didn't amend it, no questions asked, send it through. Basically abdicating your responsibility here. And that was a big reason we heard such opposition, because then came the final vote to continue the bill, which is their way of saying is dead. It sounds a lot better than it is. It's actually not good. That got even more Republicans jumping on with the 26-18 vote. Senators Brian Adams and Ross Turner piled on, and Senator Tom Davis, who has been opposed to the bill and the process from the start, blasted it from the Senate floor.
On April 26, 2021, when the census results were released, to the time that a reapportionment bill was approved in this General Assembly, 9 months passed. 9 months. I want to contrast that with what we're doing right now. And the Senator from Anderson did a great job of chronicling it. We've had this matter before us properly for 19 days. 19 days ago, a map that was generated by a consultant in Washington, D.C., without any input from South Carolinians, without any input from legislators, without any input from anybody normally associated with the reapportionment process. We were given from Washington, D.C., a new map. And we were told, pass this map. We want you to pass this map. And the House went ahead, and they did it. They took the map, gave it a subcommittee hearing, gave it a committee hearing, brought it to the floor of the House. Every single amendment was rejected. The map was passed intact and then sent over to us. And then we've had it under debate, as you've heard, since last Thursday. Think about how extraordinary that is for a moment. A process that properly done took our state Senate 9 months, 10 community hearings, 8 subcommittee hearings, our own demographic analysis, our own work, and contrast that with what we're doing now. We have completely outsourced our constitutional obligation to prepare a congressional redistricting map to a consultant in Washington, D.C. We have no idea how that map was created. Now, in fairness, he did show up before a House subcommittee meeting via Zoom and spoke for 7 minutes and 40 seconds. And then he had to leave. He had another appointment. He said he was going to take no questions. He took no questions. 7 minutes and 40 seconds is our legislative record supporting this map. 7 minutes and 40 seconds. I don't know how anybody with a straight face in this chamber can vote for a map with that absence of diligence. I really don't. Especially an obligation as important as redistricting, which under our rules, it's so important that there are special rules in regard to how long it has to be under debate.
Wow, a lot going on there. Meanwhile, 6th District Congressman Jim Clyburn was squarely in the sights of this redistricting push, all in an effort to make all 7 congressional districts Republican. In fact, he voted early. He was part of the 32,000 folks that voted early. And though there was debate whether this map drawn by the Republican Redistricting Trust would actually make his district Republican, there were also serious concerns by dissenting Republicans publicly and others privately that eliminating Clyburn would harm the state when a Democratic administration returns to the White House. Ebbs and flows. Especially when you look at the outsized role he plays and the state plays in the presidential primary process. Now, Clyburn voted early Tuesday in Orangeburg at the County Administrative Center, and he spoke with the press.
But the process was constitutional. This White House says, to hell with the process. To hell with the Constitution.
Shame.
Just do what we want done. And that's what has us here today. It makes no sense, and South Carolinians should reject this. I'm very proud of this state. I've lived every moment of my life in this state. My parents' roots go back to the ships that came into Charleston, and their family ended up on my father's side in Kershaw County, my mother's side in Lee County. I was born and raised in Sumter County. I came to college here in Orangeburg County. On my way to Charleston to T school, I stopped by Berkeley County, Monk's Corner, and picked up a wife. So I know the state, and I am embarrassed that so many people in our legislature will allow strangers in Washington to tell them what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. They ought to be embarrassed in that process as well.
Clyburn was first elected to represent the 6th District in 1992, something that was made possible because of the Voting Rights Act. He became the state's 9th African American to serve in Congress after his last predecessor left office 95 years before. And that's the show, folks. Thanks for tuning in for 3 weeks of insanity with me. We learned so much, and yet so little. It's all in vain, maybe. Okay. Anyway, thanks for listening to the podcast. You guys can always show us your appreciation by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, or a voicemail at 803-563-7169. What'd you think of the entire process? Huh? Was that fun? You can stay up to date with the latest news on SCETV.org and SouthCarolinaPublicRadio.org, and don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. Sydney Wilcox is our intern. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.
Yeah, no, I got a slightly different workflow.
Yeah, that's just not going to work for me.
Well, you can't argue with the results.
Yeah, it takes a long time, but the results are there.
So, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. You know what I mean?